Murph was so upset when the boat went away, and it was so adorable, and I felt so sad for them. Hello interwebs, I am here to review the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy, this time Season 1, Episode 8, Time Amok, which is obviously a wonderful play on the title Amok Time, the classic Star Trek The Original Series episode. That being said though, getting into my non-spoiler review up front, this episode has nothing to do, sadly, with Vulcan Ponfar, though perhaps that's probably for the best considering what Ponfar actually is about, and this is a kid's show, so Maybe that's something of Star Trek lore that we don't need to delve into for the kids. Actually, you know what? I don't care. Anyways, regardless, this episode's title may be a play on that, but it's actually much more of a time travel, timey-wimey kind of story. And I have to say, I was so here for this episode. In fact, I would go so far as to say that this is probably my favorite episode of Prodigy since the pilot. Yeah, even more so than the cameo-filled episode that we got 2 episodes ago, Kobayashi. I know a lot of people loved that one, but this one for me finally nailed what I've been wanting this show to do. It had a really fun Star Trekian concept where we have the ship sort of fractured into different little time zones. Very much felt like a true classic kind of Star Trek tale, but one that hasn't truly been specifically done in Star Trek. There's been similar episodes like it, like with the episode Fracture over on Star Trek Voyager, which is another one of my classic favorites. Or there was like the Time Frozen one that we got towards, I think, Season 6 or Season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation, that the title of which is escaping me. But this specific one, with different characters being stuck in different types of time, like different time flows, I don't think I've really seen that sort of thing done in Star Trek, and I think that was really, really cool. But even more so, this episode also used all of those different moments to really hone in on all of our characters. Each and every single one of our characters throughout this gets a strong moment to shine that progresses their character arc and actually shows growth to them. Rock Talk specifically probably gets the most, but every single character gets a strong moment that really shows how much they've grown and shows where they need to go as characters and gives them an arc within this episode. But even beyond that, we also get furthering of the story of our characters with the Diviner and Deathlock. And then on top of that, my biggest problem with this show so far has been me having little quibbles and quabbles with some of the world building and some of the logic of each individual episode within the context of this show, and none of that was present here. Yes, there is some Star Trek mumbo jumbo science here that makes no sense if you think about it for longer than 2 seconds. And yes, there are some weird logic-y things to do with how the science exactly works. But to be honest, that doesn't bother me because that's almost par for the course when it comes to Star Trek. Just science kind of being like, we'll massage it a little bit. That's just part of what Star Trek is. But there was no problems that I had with how this setting was set up, other than one small thing that I'm willing to let you have a pass. And otherwise, the world building and everything that was going on here was really great, and characters that I've been frustrated with, like Dahl, even got moments to really show that he has grown as a character and really just have really wonderful moments that still showed his flaws and the problems that we've been having with him, but started to show that he is beginning to grow beyond that and is willing to go beyond that when he's given the chance to. And I think all of that was just made for a truly, truly excellent episode of Prodigy. So easily my favorite episode of Prodigy so far since the pilot. Hands down, great job overall by the team on this one. But with all that said, that means we now get to go into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, you can jump off here and we're going to dive right in. So getting into spoilers, like I said, this one was a lot of fun for me. I enjoyed the opening of this episode where we have the crew on the holodeck kind of dealing with the aftermath of last episode. As Janeway says in the opening log, they feel a little bit down and feel like they've failed and that they aren't really gelling as a crew. And so I like that there's sort of little pieces of emotional through line throughout each episode, even though we're getting sort of individual storylines in each one. But from there, we get this holodeck program where essentially they're solving that classic logic puzzle of you have a chicken, a fox, and grain. How do you get them across the river, and how do you solve it? Which, by the way, easy puzzle to solve. You bring the chicken across, then you go back, you grab the grain, bring the grain across, then take the chicken back, take the fox, fakes the fox over, and then go back and grab the chicken. I think that's how that works. I think that's the easy way. Anyways, regardless, the crew's all frustrated, and Murph is really adorably just like hanging out in the boat. But we also get Rock Talk being upset at being called a security officer, which I really liked because it kind of rubbed me a little bit the wrong way earlier in the season, where we had Rock Talk constantly saying that she didn't like to be considered rough and aggressive, and then they immediately shoved her into the security officer role. And so I like her pushing back against that assignment right here, and I thought that that was something that was desperately needed because it did kind of bother me earlier on in the season, and I'm glad it was actually being addressed. But then the crew kind of falls apart, and Dahl gets upset and reveals to Janeway that he was actually the one, that they actually aren't Starfleet cadets and that they stole the ship. And I like the little subtle thing here that Janeway was more surprised that they stole the ship and not that they were Starfleet trainees, because if we remember way back in episode, I think 2 or 3, it was kind of clear that Janeway knew that they weren't trainees, that they weren't Starfleet cadets, but would not have known that they had stolen the ship. So I did like that subtle little awareness on Janeway's part, that she wasn't shocked that they weren't Starfleet cadets, but that she was surprised that they had stolen the ship. So I did enjoy that. But from there, we get the ship going into a tachyon storm, and I love Jake and Pog saying like, oh, I thought that was sort of an external rendition of what we were feeling inside. I thought that was great. And that leads to the ship sort of getting into a crisis moment, leading to our wibbly wobbly timey wimey stuff in a minute. My only knock against this episode really comes at this point, because I'm really just sort of left wondering why the ship didn't go around the tachyon storm that they were encountering. It didn't look that big and looked like it could have easily been avoided if they had gone around, especially since they're not really going anywhere specific. So they could have just been like, we'll just go this way instead. So I was a little bit frustrated that they would just let the ship sort of wander into that, or Janeway didn't stop it and just taking the helm for a quick second and be like, nope, we'll just skirt that. So a little bit of a convenience there, but we'll let it slide for the rest of this episode being so good. I will allow one minor plot convenience per episode. So there you go. At the same time, though, we also jump back to the Diviner, who gets a message from the Ferengi from last episode, who was Dahl's former captain and leader and mentor, and she reveals where the ship is. And I loved this surprise thing because it was obviously stated that they are across the galaxy. They can't just jump over to the Gamma Quadrant. But the Diviner uses the ship printer in order to get Deathlock over onto the Protostar. I thought that was really clever. Again, you could get a little bit frustrated and say like, well, why didn't he ever use that before in terms of like finding the Protostar? But again, he does state that he needed to know the exact coordinates of the Protostar in order to get there. Again, you could also fudge and say, well, he doesn't know the exact location of the Protostar now because he may have gotten it from the Ferengi, but she wasn't exactly tailing them at that moment. So there's a little bit of a convenience here too that if you could get nitpicky about. But again, I thought that this was a clever way to have there be a threat from the Diviner, even though he was across the galaxy. Thought that that was really nice. But the ship enters the storm, and a big problem starts off because we eventually learn that the ship is going to blow up because of this weird tachyon surge that happened, but it split all of our crew into different time zones, with each of them going at different speeds. So I love that Jenkin Pog tries to fix things, but he only has a few seconds before the ship blows up, and then Janeway gets splintered over into Rock Talk's section, and Rock Talk doesn't feel confident enough in order to do anything, and sends Janeway away into the next time zone. I thought that that was really just a cool way to show that Rock Talk's having this underconfidence in herself because she is so young and doesn't really have a sense of identity and self, especially after pushing back against the security officer position. I thought that was wonderful. And then I love that we get Zero, and Zero actually is like, I can totally do this. I'm a science officer. I know what to do. I know what we need. We need to make this warp thing. I can do it. Totally down. We have enough time. But then realizes that they don't have enough time in order to do it because they are in sort of the wrong time zone. Again, really clever, and I love this idea of the sine wave, that people that were closest to the warp core going off were the ones that sort of alternatively were going through different types of time zones. Again, wibbly wobbly, sciencey wincy, sure, it makes no real sense overall in terms of how time works, but I thought that that was a cool idea nonetheless, and sounded sciencey enough for me to make it be like, yeah, that sounds like Star Trek science. And so we jump over to the next one when Zero's unable to complete the thing in time, and I love that it's Murph, that Murph is just like, can't do anything, I'm just eating this shoe going on here. And then Janeway jumps back into Dahl's area, and we get a wonderful little sequence for Dahl as well, because again, Dahl hasn't had confidence in himself. He feels down on himself, feels like he can't do it, feels like he's not good enough, especially after the last 2 episodes where he's felt that way. And so finally he gets a moment here where he actually does feel like he can contribute, and he actually makes the thing that they need, but they realize that they're missing a dilithium sort of core, and that still contributed, it still helped, it was still needed, but it wasn't the last thing that it needed. And so I like that Dahl felt like he contributed. He got to have a little bit of an arc, but he also got to still deal with that sense of failure and sort of continuing that arc of being willing to be not perfect every single time, but being part of a team. And so I really like that fractured sense of crew that they were still able to bring together across the different time zones, still building each other up and each contributing in a different way and contributing to their own arcs. Because then we jump over to Gwen, and she is also trying to build this thing. She's fairly confident in doing it, but she can't find the particular piece, and that's when Deadlock comes on the ship and starts attacking and basically tries to delete Janeway. And we get a little bit of pushing forward of that arc with Janeway realizing that Deathlock was the one who was on her ship before, but Deathlock revealing a little bit like he wasn't the one that erased her memory. And then he uses Chakotay's voice, which is really great to see Robert Beltran back in that little moment where Deathlock was using his voice to delete her. But then we jump back to Rock Talk section, and Rock Talk gets a wonderful moment where she's been what's the like clock stoppering it up. I think that's my touchstone for like being stuck in time. I'm sure there's other ones, but I'm just thinking the classic Nickelodeon movie Clock Stoppers. No one else remember that film? It was a fun film. Regardless, Rock Talk's been there for a very long time, but was able to teach herself how to do all of these different things and start to find a sense of identity and confidence within herself in all of that time alone. We don't really get a specific sense of how long she's been alone. Probably, I would say at least a few months, maybe even a year or two. So, because we get a clear sense that she's been alone for a while, but not like too much to have gone like crazy. And so I like that little bit of awareness of like how long she's been alone. But she was able to solve things and just needed to know where to put the thing, and that's why she was able to rebuild Janeway in that time and was able to save the ship. And so they save the ship. Everyone gets back together. They all celebrate. And I also should mention that I really love Gwen's message to Rock Talk. I thought that was really, really sweet, and Gwen sort of connecting with Rock Talk. And I think this was the highlight of the episode for me, saying that like we shouldn't have defined you. I've been defined myself, and so we shouldn't define you for yourself. We should let you discover your identity. And I really like that. I thought that that was very, very sweet, and I like this connection between characters that we're starting to see, them all sort of finding ways that they can connect with each other emotionally. And so just really, really beautiful, wonderful stuff. Bringing us out to the end of the episode where they're all celebrating. They realized they had done it. They've sort of come back together as a crew. And then we get the last little hint with the cliffhanger that Deathlock is still on the ship. So at the end of the day, I really love this episode. As I said before, every single character had a moment, had a minor arc to contribute to everything. There was some fun sciencey wincy stuff. There was some good emotional arcs for the entire crew as a whole, not just individually. And there were some very sweet moments on top of that, as well as pushing forward both Dahl, Gwen, and Rock Talk and the overall story. I think each one of those characters really got great emotional moments. So for a 24-minute show to do all of that and still have fun on top of it, I have to say this was easily the strongest episode for me. I adored this one. This one was fantastic. Best episode of Prodigy so far for me in my mind, and I just loved it. So I'd love to hear all your thoughts, though, down in the comments below. Did you love Time Amok? I'd love to hear that. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more reviews and my reviews of Star Wars Book of Boba Fett. But beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching, and hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy, my friend.